Hi, everyone. My name is Oliver Brown. We're here again presenting the third episode of Window to Origin, series by Condesa Co.Lab, which is dedicated to providing a unique and intimate window and insight into the world of coffee and coffee production and producers and processing, of course. And today we're joined by none other than Getu Bekele from G Broad PLC in Ethiopia. Getu's coffee researcher, geneticist, renowned author of Ethiopian Coffee Varieties, and he's based in Ethiopia, and we've been working with him since 2018. We're very happy to have one of the leading experts of coffee research joining us, and we're very happy to be working so closely with you, Getu. So, Getu, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Oli. Thank you. Yeah, as you mentioned it, I'm working with G Broad Trading PLC, which is based in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. I'm the founder of this company, and the main activities of this company currently is providing consultancy service on coffee business, research, and development. But our main focus is basically working very closely with smallholder coffee farmers, and we are helping them in terms of providing training on agronomic practices, on processing, on marketing, and on quality control. And so far, we worked with around 87 smallholder coffee farmers from around Getu zone. And we are expanding this project, working with smallholder coffee farmers from Getu to different areas in Gucci, in Bade, and in Gera, in around Limo. And we basically started working with the smallholder coffee farmers, started back in 2017, when the government put in place a new policy which entitles smallholder coffee farmers, to be an exporter, like to have their own export license and trade their coffees directly, negotiate prices and everything directly with buyers and roasters. Before that, this system was not in a place, and they used to go through middlemen, and they were not entitled about their product. They are not responsible to negotiate price. But there are other people who are working on their behalf. But this new policy basically helps them to have their own export license and trade their coffee directly. So our role in this process is basically helping them define their quality and marketing their coffee and training them about the trend of international market, how the coffee market basically goes. And they are actively involving in all this process, and they are the one who are making decision, when we're setting prices, when we're negotiating prices with roasters or buyers.
That's awesome. And how difficult is it for these smallholder producers to get access to the market if there wasn't someone like yourself sort of helping facilitate that? Is it actually very challenging for these producers? I know they often have the license, but I'm assuming it's actually very, very difficult to connect all the dots.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is, you should have a knowledge about, coffee marketing, and you have to have experience how the coffee trade basically goes. And even in Ethiopia, because our farmers are quite poor, they were not well educated. I mean, they don't have email account, and they cannot read, most of them. I mean, our presence is very important at this point. Only having the export license for these farmers is not really enough. I mean, you should have an office, you should have a lab, and you should have people working for you on quality control, on marketing, on communication, and all these different aspects. And these are also missing, points in this very nice equation of having export license for these farmers. So I mean, our presence is very significant in terms of like linking these farmers with the international market. And we're bridging this gap, and we're trying to fill the gap they're facing. And sometimes our companies also like financing their business. I mean, when they bring in their coffee for export cleaning, they need to take their coffee to the port. There are like fees associated with logistics. There are fees associated with different export activities. So without our presence, without the presence of a company like us, it's really difficult for these farmers to find a market and to sell their coffees. I mean, the very important thing is like, okay, the government entitles them like to have the export license if they fulfill the main criteria. The main criteria is basically having 2 hectare and above farm size. So what do we really expect, like, the production volume from this small farm size, maybe 10 bags or 20 bags, and for a single farmer, like, to process and export 10 bags is not really easy. I mean, as an exporter, you need to fill in a container. You should have all these different facilities to make things work very well. We created farmers group called Jabanto, and we started with 29 farmers, and they used to produce around like 5 containers because there are like 29 farmers. We are combining their lots, and we're building a macro lot, and we fill in a container, and we start like exporting around 5 containers from 29 farmers. This year, we are 87, and we're producing over like 10 containers under
Yeah, wow.
Jabanto. And these farmers are like in this group, and they're delivering their micro lot, and we're developing a bigger lot, and we're supplying this coffee under the name of Jabanto to different countries, including Australia, working closely with Condesa. And yeah, so far we are really happy, and we are successful in terms of expanding the volume and trying to, reach to different roasters through Condesa in Australia.
It's interesting, and I could keep asking you so many questions. I know we've got to get on to our own questions from the people who've sort of posed them on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook. But I want to keep going, so I will. Of those traditions in the group, like, I know that Ethiopians are big coffee drinkers, and you drink a lot of your own coffee. But really, how many, before you were involved, would have tasted their coffee, understood the quality before you started to show them the reality of how their coffee tasted in a sort of lab perspective? Is that something that's new to them, or is that something that they've already had an understanding of beforehand?
Yeah, I mean, farmers have got a very good understanding about, coffee management practices, agronomic practices, and processing activities. But because they were not in a place, to communicate, with buyers, with consumers, with roasters, and they had no chance of like, hearing or getting feedback, from these users, end users. And at the same time, the connection between local labs, coffee labs, and with the farmers was not very strong. And yeah, before that, farmers were not like in a position to understand what coffee quality means, but bringing them here in our lab and like letting them to taste their coffee. I mean, we don't reject any bad coffee. That's a very good point for us, like to teach the farmers how bad coffee can be if you are not processing it very well. So they taste like a highly fermented coffee. They taste the Quakers. They taste like insect damage, black beans, and they start like understanding how diverse coffee can be in terms of quality. So our intervention in this regard was really very significant, and we could see a very significant change in terms of like their understanding, and their like even after having this exposure, they start like implementing all these good coffee processing activities, and they could change, they could improve their quality at the end of the day. So we're seeing like over years, since 2017, now we are in our fourth year, and we've seen like a very significant change in terms of quality within that group.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. How are things sort of you've sort of finished the main harvest, and I know you're sort of doing a lot of the shipping. How's the sort of COVID situation in Ethiopia? What is the state of the country? How is everything at the moment?
Yeah, currently we're hearing that like a large number of new cases are recorded every day, and because of this, the government put in place some restrictions, and these restrictions are basically like affecting the way we are working, especially when we're moving coffees, in terms of accessing trucks, in terms of accessing containers. I mean, something like a national impact and at the same time international impact. All this confounded together and affecting just our coffee business, and that's why we see sometimes like delayed shipments. We've got like problems of moving the coffees from the village to the capital city for export cleaning. I mean, there might be truck shortage and different issues, but it's not like as expected, as we were worried in the first time when we heard about like the first case report of COVID in Ethiopia. Was really very devastating. Was back in 2020 when we were moving the coffee. It was very significant, but its impact were basically noted during the harvesting time back in November, December 2020. And because of all these restrictions, there were like few labor or few people are like available for harvesting, for processing. But at the end of the day, like the government losing like the restriction, and everything just became normal at the end of like the harvesting period. But the main significant impact of COVID is like inflation, like for farmers. The cost of materials for coffee processing or for coffee business basically inflated because of COVID-19, which directly affected the national inflation rate in the country.
Yeah, wow. And I'm right in saying you've had COVID as well, and a lot of your sort of your friends have been affected directly.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because we didn't stop working, we were open, and people are coming to the lab. And like the first months of the pandemic, we were not like testing with people together. I was tasting coffee alone, but you're meeting people, you're wearing your mask, and yeah, you spend your time talking with people, and we were not closed generally. But I had like a feeling of like losing my taste and smell at some point, and yeah, it was a kind of like very new symptom to me, and I was questioning what's really happening. Is that COVID? Then I kept reading about like symptoms of COVID, and one of the main symptoms of COVID is like losing your smell and taste at the same time. So yeah, I didn't taste, but because of all the symptom, I said, hey, just I got COVID. I'm resistant now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well,
And
we're glad,
like different.
we're glad you're still going.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, I'm hearing like different people like in the coffee industry, like saying, yeah, just we got tested and we're positive. I mean, but yeah, like everyone is alive now. People are doing very well. So I mean, yeah, you need to put in place all the precautions, and you need to be more safe because COVID is changing its genetic makeup, and different ways in a different time. So you don't know what kind of new variant will be there in the future. So wearing mask, like social distancing, not shaking hands, all these things should be in place for everyone. That's my recommendation. That's my communication every time with farmers and with people coming to my office. Hey, just you don't have mask? No, just you're not allowed to get into my office. Yeah. So I mean, this thing should be in place till we get vaccinated.
I remember when I was there, because we were over there, Stephen and I, in March 2020, just as it was starting to kick off. And I remember thinking when we were moving out, like, no one was taking any precautions whatsoever. Like there was no,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, despite the fact that it was just starting to happen. Is that like, I know you've been quite careful, but are Ethiopians in general still adhering to, masks and no touching, or has that gone out the window?
Yeah, I mean, it really differs from place to place. Like here in the capital city, because there's a close control by the government and monitoring, and people like basically wear masks when the government's like announces all these restrictions. But like after a week or two, you will see like people are like still walking on the street without mask. But if you're going outside of the capital city, especially when I was in the south back in November, it was really very shocking. No one is like wearing mask. Like life is as normal, that really shocks us. And I mean, yeah, it completely differs from place to place, and it differs on the basis of like if the government's really serious and announcing all the restriction, people start wearing masks for a day or two, then it keeps declining, following all these restrictions.
Yeah, wow. It's going to be it's going to be with us for a while, and I guess we're all, we're all waiting for the the option to have our injection as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, it's going to be an interesting time for the next 6 to 10 months. I know that, but
Sure.
yeah, we're glad you're still with us, and we're glad you're healthy, and yeah, we're glad we're able to do this talk, Getu.
Thank you.
Right, so let's move into some of the questions. In reference to your book, your reference guide to Ethiopian coffees and varieties, as we've mentioned, which you co-wrote with Timothy Hill. Mohammed asks, how were you able to learn about the coffee varieties? And are there any special schools in Ethiopia that are specifically looking at the genetics of coffee?
Yeah, for myself, just I studied plant science for my bachelor, and for my master's, I specialized in breeding and genetics, especially working coffee research on coffee for my master class. But before my master class, I joined the National Coffee Research Institute based in Jimma, the southern western part of Ethiopia. And I worked there for 7 years. And that's the time when I basically, learned and experienced more about coffee and its genetics. But if someone wants to learn and go to school in Ethiopia, there is a university called Jimma University, which is still in the southwestern part of Ethiopia in Jimma town. And that's the place where people can learn about coffee. And they don't have like specifically coffee genetics, but under their postgraduate program for masters, I think for PhD too, they give coffee and tea, and under that you learn so many subjects, including breeding, genetics, processing, and other stuff. So that is currently the only place where you can learn more and learn specifically about coffee.
And why was it that you specifically wanted to share with the world the importance of coffee variety? Liam W asks, will knowledge about native coffee varieties and species in Ethiopia help other countries in their coffee growing? Was it a part of that drove you to write the book?
Yeah, I mean, the main interest about this book is basically when we start about discussing this with Timothy Hill, is about we're hearing about like heirloom mislabeling Ethiopian coffee varieties and lack of information in the industry about describing Ethiopian coffee products. And so many people like in the coffee industry describe Ethiopian coffee varieties as heirloom. And yeah, we start like talking about like my experience working in research and the experience of Tim Hill traveling to origin, especially like in Ethiopia for several years and communicating with farmers. He knows very well what kind of varieties are there in the farm and what kind of varieties are like communicated by farmers. And yeah, we sat together and we started like designing how we can fill that gap of misunderstanding and mislabeling Ethiopian coffee varieties. So yeah, with this book, we're aiming to address all the actors along the supply chain, starting from small farmers, basically farmers, and traders, exporters, researchers, as final users, consumers, we want to like give them the right information when they're drinking coffee. I mean, we're labeling a name, we are describing the coffee, and the barista, given barista in a given coffee shop, basically talks about the coffee, its origin, its variety, the people working on it. I mean, yeah, at this point, we want the barista to communicate clearly, and we want them like to give them the right information to the final users. And yeah, I mean, to mention specifically like for the farmers, why this book is very important for them. I mean, within the book, we try to like give a detailed description for different coffee varieties, and having this information for the farmers, they can make a smart decision in terms of when they're making selecting coffee variety for their farm. By knowing these specific characteristics, it's quite easy for them like to select an appropriate variety which best fits to their environment. And when we're talking about like a researcher, how a researcher can use this book, I mean, like for a breeder, the presence of like very diverse information, very diverse, variety is very important for a researcher to do his own research and breed, maybe crossing two different varieties together and develop another interesting variety. So having this specific information for these different varieties is very important for the researcher. And at the same time, like for roasters, are they getting the right information? Are they buying the right product, or are they like getting a mixed coffee lot? So its practice might be you know the, the use of this book in terms of buying specific variety from Ethiopia will be maybe in the future, but these days I have like a mixed coffee varieties are exported to the market. But in the future, when we start communicating specifically about specific varieties, there is a possibility of having a specific farm covered by single variety, and there is a possibility of like sourcing all these amazing single varieties, maybe like geisha in the future. So I mean, yeah, this book is very valuable for different actors, and it's gonna contribute significantly to the global coffee industry, specifically like in giving information about Ethiopian coffee varieties.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing, sort of, I think, until I met you and sort of like understood a bit about why, what drives you and why you're so keen on the variety side. I hadn't, it hadn't really occurred to me, whilst we see, for example, single producer farmer lots from Costa Rica and from Colombia and Central America, the idea that you would get single farmer producer lots in Ethiopia was unheard of. And like again, we're all so used to our yogurt of grade one, kosher wash, wash kosher.
Yeah.
Like it's like
Yeah.
the most detail you'll get. And the idea that you can go down to the region, the town, the producer, the variety from one single producer is very exciting. It's a pleasure to be able to join you on a bit of that journey, Getu.
Yeah, thank you, man. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the main interest basically. We used to trade Ethiopian coffee as a bigger name, like bigger region, as you say, like Ugechafe or Kochare, or Guji. But we're breaking down that bigger region into like smaller village like Kebalis, and we're trying to like catch a single farmer within that village, and from that we want to like cascade it down to like a single variety. I mean, these days within the group, within the Japanto group, we're talking about like focusing on specific variety. After having this book, we start like, tasting coffees on the basis of their morphological, difference, bigger and shorter coffee trees, bigger fruit size and smaller fruit size. We trying to like, separate all these different trees, and just we are testing these varieties, and we could find like, Kurume, which is an amazing, promising coffee variety. Currently we're promoting that, and in the future is going to be another amazing single variety which can be traded as Kurume, and which might compete maybe with Geisha in the future. No, but we're working on that to characterize it very well in terms of its morphology, in terms of its yield, in terms of its quality, in terms of like its adaptation characteristics. After having all this information, it's quite easy for us like to promote that as a single variety and to have a brand on it, and promote in the international market and let people enjoy that specific variety. I mean, like if our farmers like focusing on that specific variety, there is a possibility of expanding this amazing variety in different areas. And the other interesting point about like this Kurume is it's a wide adapting variety. If you grow it like in Kochori or Gechafe, Guji or Jima or Walega or Harar, I mean, this variety tastes very well. It tastes like almost the same. And with that, there is a possibility of like, producing this single variety in a wider farmland, and there is a possibility of like sourcing an amazing coffee variety from Ethiopia in the future.
Wow, that's so exciting. It really is to sort of see it go down to that detail. That leads us nicely into question by Kate L. And she says, why is it important to know what all the different heirlooms are? Don't most of them get mixed together before exporting? Now, I know that's a bit of a big question, but give us an insight. How easy or difficult is it, one, to work out what variety you're looking at, and two, how easy is it to separate them, before they get commingled, and sort of, pull them apart and taste them separately? Does that take a lot of work to do that?
Yeah, I mean, to answer this specific question, it would be great maybe to start with like what is Ethiopia in terms of coffee diversity. So yeah, Ethiopia is like the origin and the center of genetic diversity. That means it's a country where you can find thousands of different coffee varieties growing in the wild, in the coffee farmlands owned by farmers, in the garden, in different places. And yeah, as she said it, I mean, it's true. All these different thousand different varieties are mixed and exported like that. Then why it's really important to differentiate or know about these different heirlooms? Now the point is, okay, we have all this plenty, different uh, diverse coffee varieties. And for me, like as a breeder, I really love that. That is the main starting point for a breeder, to have like this diversity. It's from that diversity we select, we breed, and we research, and we develop a specific variety meant for specific problem, maybe addressing yield, addressing quality, addressing climate change, addressing like consumers' interest, maybe caffeine, zero caffeine variety. So breaking down that heirloom into specifics is very important for a breeder. It's very important for a farmer, because for a farmer, rather than mixing different coffee varieties in a farm, like high yielding, low yielding, high quality, poor quality, disease resistant, disease susceptible, rather than mixing all these different crazy varieties, it's advisable for a farmer to focus on very specific varieties which best fits to his farm, its environment, and which best fits its interest. Mainly yield and quality is like the leading traits for farmers. So understanding and breaking down all this into specifics is very important, like for different purpose. I mean, as a center of diversity, we need to understand all this diversity. From diversity, we need to like, develop specific varieties which best fits to a specific environment. Then yeah, these days it's really difficult to identify a specific variety from all these mixes. But after writing this book and communicating with farmers and understanding their knowledge, sharing all this experience of the farmers, how they describe the coffee varieties, and our experience and research, by combining all this, we came to identifying specific coffee varieties growing in the farmers, and we're trying to promote these specific varieties. We're promoting them because they are interesting in terms of yield, in terms of quality, in terms of adaptation, in terms of drought. So for me, currently, it might be very difficult to separate, bigger lots into a specific variety. But in the future, because we're working on that, I'm quite sure that in the future we will have so many single variety farmers in Ethiopia, and that might contribute significantly to the global coffee industry, and it really helps the farmers to get, a better price from this. And so far, we experimented about selling single variety coffee from Ethiopia, like Kurume, Condesa one, and already promoted this variety in Australia. And we worked with another importer roaster in Taiwan, and we're trying to get all these single variety lots to different countries. So for me, it's very important. But as Kees said, it's really difficult this time, to separate macro loads into specific varieties.
Yeah. So, when I was in Ethiopia in 2015, so I had some experience visiting the wild forest coffees, and only very little. I think I've sort of spent an afternoon walking over to one. But tell us a little bit about why they're so important. And I know it was something that Kew Gardens at the time, an institute back in London, Richmond, was heavily involved in. Why are those wild forest coffees so important, and why is the sustainability of them such a key part of Ethiopian coffee?
Yeah, since Ethiopia is a center of genetic diversity for coffee, the main diversity which is existing naturally is still available in the wild forest. So maintaining that environment, that ecosystem, is very important to safeguard the national coffee industry and at the same time the global coffee industry. So, in the future, if you lose most of our varieties which are growing these days in the garden, semi-forest, or in the plantation, due to some other factors like climate change, then where we can find, our varieties, where we can collect and do research and develop another variety which best fits to the future problems and the current problems. So for the country, that's a very important ecosystem. That's a very important area to be maintained, to be conserved, and it should be highly sustainable. It should be there. It should be well managed by the local community. It should be well managed by the local government and the national government. So that's very important. That's the source of genetic diversity. That is a coffee gene pool where we can, fish in the future any important, coffee varieties for the global coffee industry. But it's very tough to conserve, that ecosystem, that forest area, due to so many challenges, like an increased deforestation activities happening in that area due to interest in increasing or expanding farmlands, and due to urbanization, there's a big pressure on forest area, and it's really shrinking over time. But the government should give focus in the future, to maintain that, or maybe to make collection of these naturally existing varieties and conserve it in a very different research flows for the future use.
Yeah, wow. I think one of the things that everyone is so aware of is geisha, and how it's grown sort of globally. That segues nicely into a question by Sam C, and he says, Are there many of the coffee varieties in Ethiopia that are able to be grown in other countries, or can they only be natively grown in Ethiopia? Give us a bit of insight into that, because everyone knows that, as I said, there's geisha, wush wush. Is it possible to do that now?
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. Like to mention geisha, which is originally from Ethiopia, but is very famous now in Panama and other countries. And at the same time, wush wush in Colombia, there is a variety called har, which is known and famous in Rwanda, Java in Indonesia. All these are like originally from Ethiopia. So to answer shortly that the question is, yeah, there are Ethiopian origin coffee varieties still growing in other different countries, but when did these varieties basically moved out of the country? So I mean, this is a long story. Was maybe back started like in 1930s, specifically like geisha, and after that, like in 1940 and 50s, due to the mission by FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, with their mission of collecting coffee genetic diversity and conservation. Thousands of different Ethiopian coffee varieties were taken to Costa Rica, and they are still currently available growing under conservation plots in that country. And due to this, some of Ethiopian coffee origins, coffee varieties could expand to different other countries. So yes, there are Ethiopian coffee varieties still growing in different countries, but is it possible these days, like to share Ethiopian coffee varieties like Rume or 74110, 74112, which are developed by breeders in Jima? Yeah, the short answer for this is no, because the government has put in place a policy which restricts coffee genetic material exchange. So it's not possible to take any coffee variety from Ethiopia. That is illegal, and the government has already in place, this restriction. So I don't know when they started putting this restriction, but it's been there like for a long time.
Yeah, wow. And again, I mean, do you think that at least sort of the sharing of knowledge around these varieties will help other countries? Do you think there's still, whilst you may have some incredible variety in Ethiopia, do you think you can also take something from other international institutes or seed banks that could benefit Ethiopia? Did you think that sort of goes both ways?
You mean bring in other seeds to Ethiopia, new variety? Yeah, I mean, yeah, for the time being, Ethiopia's got very interesting, coffee varieties which are developed and confirmed by breeders. I think these days we have around 40 different coffee varieties nationally registered and researched, and they're known for their different characteristics. And we have got a variety which is high yielding. We don't have any issue with yield, and we have a coffee variety which best works for specific environment, like local for local adaptations. We have disease-resistant variety, like coffee berry disease was devastating in Ethiopia back in 1970s, and for that we have an amazing coffee varieties still growing in the farm, and we have a drought-tolerant coffee variety. I mean, at this point, as a country of origin and center of diversity, I don't think we do need like any other variety to come into the country. That's not a kind of like priority for us. But sharing knowledge and getting information how coffee works, it's in its original environment, in its native environment, and in another countries, exchanging that kind of information would really help, everyone, researchers, farmers, everyone like involved in the coffee industry. I mean, for example, like talking to a coffee farmer from Panama back in 2018. Just we had coffee together, and just talking about how coffee grows, and I told him about like shade trees in coffee. I told him like coffee really loves shade, and if you plant your coffee trees under shade, I told him that like your coffee will have a longer life, and at the same time you will harvest yield year after year. You don't need to like pump in huge amount of organic or inorganic fertilizers. And he was surprised. How you dare like you plant coffee trees under another shade? And yeah, I shared with him different literature, and he was amazed, and he promised me like to practice, growing coffee trees under shade. I mean, this kind of knowledge exchange, how coffee trees are, performing as their origin in their native environment and in another new environment, exchanging this kind of information and knowledge really helps everyone involved in the global coffee industry in terms of like coffee farming and specific.
How often does that actually happen? How often do you get a chance to talk to geneticists from other parts of the world? How often do you get to honestly talk about different agronomical practices or pruning practices or ways in which you can sort of drive nutrients towards a tree? Does that often happen often, Getu?
Yeah, I might receive, emails from different people, maybe from a farmer or from a researcher, just asking different question. And before the COVID-19 pandemic, I mean, I used to travel a lot, working with counterculture in different countries, especially in East Africa, like 6 countries. It was a great time, man. Just traveling around and meeting different farmers, sharing my knowledge and gaining amazing experience and knowledge from them. It was really very helpful on both sides. I mean, I'm sharing my experience about Ethiopian coffee, and they're sharing their experience in their area. I mean, yeah, that was really very significant for me and gaining a different experience working with different people. So yeah, after the pandemic, I stopped just traveling because of the disease, and yeah, I'm receiving but different email and interesting questions, and yeah, I was talking to people in World Coffee Research like a few weeks ago about the possibility of like collaborating with the Ethiopian Coffee Research Program, and they have already got this agreement to collaborate in research. That is really amazing. That's really the thing we were dreaming about. I mean, having World Coffee Research collaborating with the Ethiopian National Coffee Research Program, it's gonna just help the national coffee research and development program at the same time the global coffee industry. So yeah, it's only like due to COVID that I'm not meeting people in person. But yeah, they came into my lab, we're tasting coffee together. Buyers are coming, roasters are coming, consumers are coming, and we're tasting coffee together. And we're like sharing our knowledge and experience. They're traveling to different places. They're sharing their experience. I mean, yeah, it's gonna happen again. Maybe after we everything is settled with COVID.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad to hear it, and glad to hear things are going to keep evolving for you, Ethiopia, and us, hopefully. um, we're sort of coming to near the end of our time. I think we've been chatting for over 45 minutes, but I'll end with one last question from Mitch L. He asks, "What is your coffee? What's your favorite coffee varietal, and why? Is it for production, for yield, or is it because it tastes so good?"
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm gonna say it again about the center of diversity. Here in Ethiopia, I mean, you get like thousands of different coffee varieties, and you might be interested with one variety because of its yield, and you might be interested for another variety for its disease susceptibility affected highly by disease. I mean, as a breeder, that's a very interesting trait for me. I mean, to see a coffee variety which is completely devastated by like coffee berry disease, for example. and that's an interesting point to research on. But yeah, and in terms of like coffee farming and the business, you're more interested about like the positive traits, the positive characteristics like yield, high quality, good adaptation, maybe zero caffeine, in the variety. But for me specifically, these days I'm trying to focus on selecting and finding with farmers a high yielding, high quality, well adapting coffee variety. So so far, like Kurume is an interesting variety for me because it's high yielding and it's high in quality. The quality is amazing, and it has got like wider adaptation. I mean, if I get this variety for a farmer who has got a farm in the southwestern part of Ethiopia, or on the eastern or the southern part of Ethiopia, everyone if gets this variety works very well. Amazing performance in terms of yield, quality, and adaptation. So for me, so far, Kurume is an amazing variety on the menu.
How does it taste?
Yeah, it's maybe like it's well balanced. If you're roasting it very well, all the attributes are like well balanced. It's very like highly vibrant. It's shakes you very well. It's really amazing. It makes you you know you smile once you sip the coffee. It has got like heavier body, like juicy stuff in it, and the acidity is amazing. It's very sharp. It's not really like kicking your tongue, but it creates a kind of very pleasant feeling. And the tropical fruit, like the intensity at which you detect, that tropical fruits floral aromas from the dry fragrance and wet fragrance is really high. I mean, for me, like when I'm scoring like on aroma, like a dry or wet aroma, I'm scoring like the intensity. Is it quite easy for me like to detect that from far from the table, from the cup, or I need to like bring in the cup and suck my like my nose in it and like yeah. I mean, that's a very important attribute for me like to measure, or is it really like making my lab smells like flora from the coffee. That's an amazing attribute. So that is a thing I always find in gourmet variety, and that's why we're promoting it. We've got confidence in it. The thing we're telling people after tasting the coffee, and when we deliver the coffee in a bigger lot, people get amazed. I mean, they get the same flavor, the same nut from time to time and from our communications. So that is a variety I'm looking forward in the future to promote it very well in terms of taking the varieties, the gene, and breeding it with another variety, and trying to expand this variety in the future.
We're excited to see more. Certainly on our part, I think pretty much anything that we bought last year went straight away. And again, similarly, we thought, oh, we'll increase the Kurume, the amount of Kurume we bought. And I think we've sold it out before it's even landed. So we certainly know there's a lot of popularity to it. So we look forward to seeing more of that and how that evolves. Thank you, Getu, so much for your time. Really appreciate you giving us insight into everything that's going on now and answering some of these questions. Really appreciate your time. All the best, and speak soon, Getu.
Yeah, thank you, Oli, for organizing this dialogue. Thank you so much.
Bye.